Welcome to the Season 3 Ward's Way podcast, where we're covering the hot legislative topics of 2025. From tariffs to tunnels and bridges. From foreign trade zones to workers' compensation. To the Fort Lauderdale International Boat Show. To the Marine Research Hub. Industry experts and clarification on the B1, B2 visas. Join us as we celebrate 75 years in business, and we're just getting started. Welcome to Season 3. Today I am here with Michelle Otero Valdes of the Michelle Otero Valdes Maritime law firm.
Very good.
And I'm honored because you are the first Latino maritime lawyer ever registered with the Florida Bar.
Well, let me correct that
Let's
just
correct
a little
that.
bit.
I mean-
Okay. First board certified Latina
Okay.
in Admiralty Maritime Law in Florida.
Okay.
Or I think
That
probably
sounds
anywhere,
even
but
better.
anyway.
Well, congratulations
Thank
on
you.
that. And I'm lucky to have you here today, and we're going to talk about tariffs.
Ooh.
And the cool part was, I know for anybody who thinks that tariffs are a bad topic, you and I had the opportunity, we'll give a shout out to professional women in yachting. You and I
Absolutely.
had an opportunity to meet on that panel, and I just really liked your take on tariffs. You were the first person that's not like, oh my God, this is terrible. You were like, it's a little bit of a challenge to keep up with it. And it's reading executive orders every day and understanding them and interpreting them and
Right.
how they change. But talk about it. Give me your take on it, which completely impressed me. So no pressure.
Great.
No pressure.
What I would say, and I mean, this is a personal belief of mine, that chaos creates opportunity.
Absolutely. I love that.
Right? So because of the chaos we're seeing, if we take aside what's happening in the news, which I try not to watch, what we're seeing is almost a daily change in the tariffs. But I think if everyone just calms down for a minute and has a look at what are tariffs intended to do,
Okay.
right? So a tariff, the way I get what President Trump is trying to do, no politics here, but is this idea of, well, the U.S. has been paying X in tariffs, so we're going to charge you a reciprocal tariff for that same thing, whatever the widget is, right? In the hopes that that government, as I understand what he's saying, that government will come to the negotiating table to try and lower their tariff so that we can say, okay, yeah, let's say 2% or whatever the number is, right? I think that's at least that's what he's expressed his goal in a nutshell to be.
And I understand it the same.
Right. Okay,
Yeah.
great.
Yeah.
So that's helpful.
Okay.
So, because I try not to watch too much news. So fast forward. So the widget is coming in, and the U.S. government will charge now that for yachts, it was 1.5% from most countries, not every country. And we'll get into that in a minute.
1.5% of the total.
Of the total value of the vessel. So you had a vessel being built in, say, the Netherlands.
Sure.
And you wanted to bring it in to the U.S. for whatever reason. It could be because you want to have it U.S. flagged because you're a U.S. owner. You would have to pay 1.5% duty before that vessel would be released to the owner if it is actually brought in, right? Imported.
Into U.S. commerce.
Correct.
Okay.
Okay. Let's distinguish that from most foreign flag vessels that come in on, say, a cruising permit.
Okay. Not for sale.
Not for sale. They could tootle about in the U.S., but then they have to leave and be gone for a certain period of time before they can get another cruising permit and tootle back into the U.S., right? So we're not talking about those.
Okay.
Okay? Where we talk about those is if they want to bring in one of those and a U.S. owner is a real patriot. I mean, I get that.
Yeah.
I get that.
U.S. Yep.
A U.S. citizen said, or maybe they do a lot of business with the government.
Okay.
and they don't feel comfortable having a foreign flag vessel that maybe they will bring that client aboard. So what do? They say, look, I want to bring in my vessel. I want to go ahead and reflag US. And then I have to inform them, for you to do that, that is now importing the vessel in the US, which means you have to pay duty. Well, what's that? And then so before it was 1.5%. So you could do the math there. Looking at it today, depending on the country it's coming from, it's not 1.5 anymore, right? We're talking, now these are delayed till like May 4th, I think is the latest date. They're talking Chinese tariffs being 145%. So I don't think any sane person would ever pay 145% duty on, say, a Chinese-built vessel. Okay? I don't think that's ultimately going to happen. But right now, as a result of Trump's first term, those vessels were already paying a higher duty. They were already paying 26.5%, which was the 1.5 for yachts. Plus, remember, he slapped that 25% duty during his first term. Okay. So I don't see necessarily the Chinese tariffs going below what I call that minimum, which was the 26.5.
Okay.
All right. But so what does that all mean, right? Now that I've given you kind of like the framework.
So we have this scenario. And by the way, most yacht owners are American. So your scenario is not that far off. It's an American trying to buy a boat.
Right.
In your example, he's buying one from the Netherlands.
Right.
She is buying one from
There you go.
Girl. And
I have a few of those.
And what happens? So there's your scenario. Now they were at 26.5%.
Right. So right now, today, that duty is there's a 10% minimum tariff.
Okay.
That President Trump is looking to impose. Okay. So that vessel that used to pay 1.5% duty would be paying 10% if they were to buy a vessel in the Netherlands and want to actually bring it in import-wise to the U.S. because they want to reflag U.S. Okay? I don't see a lot of owners doing that. They will start to think a little smarter. And one way of thinking smarter is now all those already U.S. flag vessels that may be either U.S. built or even foreign built now become a little more valuable. So what does that do for that market? It increases the value of those vessels because now they're already duty paid, right? There's a piece of paper that shows that vessel was duty paid because that was the only way they were going to get a U.S. flag.
Right.
If they were built foreign built, right? So there is an opportunity there because if we see a situation now where owners are given all of this information, they're looking at this going, well, why don't I just buy a vessel that's already U.S. built? And I'm starting to see that a little bit. Not too much because I think people are taking a wait and see attitude right now. Unfortunately, I think that if the administration is a little clearer on what they're looking to do there, that will give, even if it's just rip off the Band-Aid and it's going to be X. But I think the administration is seeing what's happening with the uncertainty, right? The markets are going a little berserk right now. And I think he needs to kind of calm the markets. I mean, that's a different thing to think about. But I think once things calm down, if in fact we are looking at higher tariffs, and I think for certain countries we will, that poses it poses a challenge for yacht brokers. Because they may have their preferred builder. right? These yacht brokers have their little builders that they've
Well, it's the boats they know the most, or the boats they're
formed
most...
relationships with. We might see a scenario where U.S. owners just say, you know what, I'm just going to go foreign and deal with the cruising permit issue. The cruising permit issue has become a moving target. Even before the Trump administration, it was a bit of a moving target. We see CBP taking a harsher view. I shouldn't say a harsher view. That's unfair. They're taking a stricter, they're actually enforcing the laws that were already in place with crew. Right? Crew are not going to be allowed to do refits. They were never allowed to do that under the B1, B2 visa.
But now let's clarify that.
Okay.
Because they can perform duties that they were performing as crew. Correct. They just cannot perform work as the contractors would do that would be outside of their crew type work, which is what they shouldn't be doing anyway.
Correct. So now they're enforcing that better. And there's a lot of ways to enforce it better, right? Everyone is on social media. Most of these crew are younger people. They tend to put a lot of dumb stuff out there, and that's getting them in trouble, right? Another issue is that they're overstaying the B1, B2. Let's say they finish their job for the season and now they're looking to get on another vessel, but they're staying here. They're not going to home to do that.
And my understanding is CBP's okay if they look for a job. They just can't earn money while they look for a job.
Correct.
Right. So as long as you had enough pocket cash to stay here and look and live and not earn any money while you're here doing that, that's okay. But that's not what was happening, which the day worker issue was coming up.
Correct.
Right. Okay.
Correct. So,
but we don't want to send out a message that says crew can't come here to do refits.
No, absolutely
They need to come here. They either need to arrive with the boat foreign or leave with the boat foreign.
Correct.
And then perform duties that they would do
within their scope.
Capacities and scope.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct. If
If
the
the chef is cooking, fine.
Right.
The chef is cooking.
If they were doing basic engine work,
changing
and
filters,
they're an engineer, perfectly
Yep,
fine.
Exactly.
Breaking down an engine and doing all, that's generally not generally within their scope of work.
Right.
Right.
No, absolutely agree.
Right. Right.
Okay.
So little things like that.
So we're seeing the shift with CBP.
Yeah.
Kind of enforcing more. You're saying.
Yes. We're seeing the shift in CBP.
The cruising license.
The cruising license is getting stricter. They're really holding to the days that you have to be out. I want to say it's 15 days, right? I'm now going based on basic memory. But, it's not, okay, let's turn around today. And I went out to Bimini for the day.
Right.
No, they're not. No, we're not doing that. So we're seeing closings. We're seeing more closings where we're going out foreign and then immediately calling at a foreign jurisdiction, i.e. like Bimini, for the purposes of restarting that clock with the new owner after we've closed, to then come back in, and then they have that full amount of time rather than coming in and then scrambling.
But there's still so many ways that these boats can come here, because we don't want to have a luxury tax mentality where we don't want the boats here. We were all around. I know. We were all around during that. We were here during that. I know I was in business during that, and that was horrible. That was targeted, and I think I kind of brought that up before to people, that was targeted not necessarily at our industry, but we were a big part of that. That was going after people with money and luxury items. This is, it seems like there's a way that as an industry, if it's still a U.S. owner, they could still buy the boat. They can still come in under a cruising permit. They can still absolutely come here and do a refit with a foreign crew.
Right.
We're not preventing anybody from doing anything. These are just further obstacles that people need to work with a maritime firm.
I don't want to say obstacles. What I'd say is that, and we discussed this at our panel last time, this whole idea of professionalism and knowing what
Good
you're
segue.
doing.
Let's do that. Yeah.
Right? And knowing
Let's
what
go there.
you're doing. And if you don't know as an owner or as a yacht manager, you ask.
Mm-hmm.
And you ask a professional. I mean, it reminds me of when you've got people that come on board that aren't specialists, right? Wards know what they're doing with respect. Shout out to wards, right? They know what they're doing with respect to anything electrical on a vessel.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? I've seen it where owners are trying to, well, that quote is ridiculous.
I'm going to call my guy.
I've heard this statement many times before where I'm going to send, my Chayito guy that I hire from Hialeah to go on board to do this work. I'm like, look, a yacht is not the same as an apartment building you may own.
Nope.
It is not the same. Please do not do that. I know it seems expensive, but it's just the cost of doing
Yachts
business.
are expensive. Yeah.
It's the cost of doing. If you want,
They heard it here. Yachts are expensive. Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
But yeah, cost of doing business. Say
It's
it. Yeah.
the cost of doing business. If you want to have fun on the water, which you clearly love, it's just the cost of doing that. And you know how many times I have to steer clients. I see it a lot, not so much in electrical. I see it more on the engine side.
Okay.
Where, I just had a CEO yesterday ask me, well, this seems really expensive for an engine rebuild. And he gives me the number. I said, look, number one, I'm a lawyer. But what I will say is that number is not outside the numbers I've seen for rebuilds of cats that already are beyond their 10-year cycle,
right?
Blah, 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 blah. We start having that conversation, and then, well, this is just shocking. I can hire, and they try to take that number and apply it to their business where they've made their money.
Sure. Which is logical to do that.
It's totally logical to do that. The problem is this is not their business. This
Correct.
is their fun. We'll take chartering aside, but this is like their fun space.
Yes.
And you've got to think of it in terms of that. Like, how valuable is that to you? I'll say there's this very well-known musician whose name will remain nameless.
Okay.
And he literally, I remember taking his deposition in a case, and he says, I literally take my Benetti.
Okay.
And I literally just go out and I just look at the water.
Mm-hmm.
And he says that brings him so much peace. That vessel is probably worth around $10 million. So this guy has spent $10 million plus the crew, plus, whatever maintenance or repairs he may have to essentially drive out, right? It's like us driving to the point. In our car.
Right.
To go look.
To look.
And that's what he does. You know why? He's away from prying eyes. He's away from paparazzi. He's away from people that want to bug him. And he gets to do whatever the heck he wants to do out in the middle of nowhere.
Do you think that it would be, it's almost like, in my experience, I find that a lot of these owners, they have these incredible teams in their business and in their homes and in their lives because and they have multiple homes and they have multiple managers and their lives are very well oiled to be able to be in a position to have a super yacht. But then that same thought process and those people that they surround themselves with in their professional life does not transfer necessarily to the boat. And then I say to myself, how does that gentleman surround themselves with that caliber of people? And I'm not naming, but you know what I'm saying.
I know exactly what you're saying.
And it's like, but how are you allowing somebody of that caliber to make choices on your $10 million motor yacht on all of that, the safety of your family, the safety of your children on board, the
Right.
safety of your friends
Right.
and your experience. How do we fix that?
It's education. But
To the owner or to the industry? I
But
think
this
a
is
little
the
bit of
prob-
both.
This is where, right? This is where I'm not sure sitting here today. It's almost as though something bad. It's almost like a law.
Yeah.
Sometimes a law doesn't get passed when something really
Bad happens and
because
then they
no one
pass it.
thought
I
of it.
agree. It's true. Which
No-
is sad. And then we say, did we really need a law to be passed? But
No,
we
I
did.
know. Yeah.
Because otherwise, seatbelts. We shouldn't have to have a law that says wear the seatbelt or you're going to die when you get an accident
Right.
and go shooting out the front of the car. We all know that that's going to happen.
Right.
But we need a law to tell us to put it on. But if we don't, would people not? I don't know. Same thing, I guess.
Right. It's the same idea. So going back to this individual, before he had a casualty aboard this said Benetti, the vessel was being managed by his brother that had no idea
How to do so.
how to do so. And this is not a criticism. He
Nope.
didn't know any better.
No.
This was a person that was able to manage those parts of his life. And I think another problem is, for example, I always tout vessel management. I think it's a great thing for a very busy owner. But then I got to tell you, some of them come in with insane money requests. And this is not a criticism. A couple of owners have reached out back to me saying, I feel like I'm just being ripped off. Like I'm not,
I hear that. Mm-hmm.
you know, I feel like they're not listening to me. So I'm paying them, like I'm thinking of another one where, I mean, this is a huge super yacht. So they're paying a yacht manager for this yacht about 13,000 euros a month. That doesn't include paying the crew and everything. This is just for the yacht management. And yes, they're over 400 GT. So there is a lot of paperwork and
course.
documentation, and they have to help the captain with that, right? I'm not criticizing the number. What I'm saying is that some of these owners kind of feel like they talk down to me. And I feel like they just want me to pay the monthly bill. And when a big bill comes in, let's say there's a major engine problem and the bill comes in, they just expect me to be a bank without actually explaining to me why this happened. And it's a customer service issue. I worked 8 years for something called a P&I club.
Okay.
And it's a form of marine insurance, and it was an English P&I club. And I used to remember they drilled into my head the member, which is the insured person. The member is number one. You try and resolve their issue, and you resolve it in a way that's beneficial for them whilst remaining within the club's kind of, framework.
Sure.
And that really stuck with me. And I noticed when I started practicing law, like there'd be times if my assistant's busy, I picked up the phone.
Yeah.
Law office. Like, Michelle, is that you? Yeah. You answer the phone? I'm like, well, yeah, my assistant's
It
at
rang.
the photocopier and the phone rang. I'm going to pick it up. And I think when we get to that level, especially at the super yacht level, if we're not treating these owners with the respect that they deserve in terms of the amounts that they're paying, the kind of getting to know what it is they like and don't like business wise, if we don't go that extra mile without charging them another dime for that, I feel like that's where it leads to the friction. I'll call it friction.
Sure.
Because there are costs that have to be incurred. And I think that these owners that are doing this, and I mean, at a certain level, you have to have vessel management. But even at the smaller yachts, when you start to see that the captain isn't quite there, and there's a very demanding owner, or the owner has peculiarities in terms of how they want the vessel operated, or they've had a series of problems with the vessel because he chose to ignore everyone's advice, right? My advice, his captain's advice, his mate's advice. Don't buy this brand boat or this particular one because it's had X, Y, and Z. You know, sometimes they do that. That's when you start talking vessel management and saying, look, and you don't, you know, you have to be very careful with owners, right? You don't talk about it in terms of professionalism as we are here today.
Sure.
But you are talking about it in terms of, don't you just want this thing to always be ready and available for you?
And be right and be safe and be
Correct.
I find, though, that the bigger the boat, there's a correlation that the larger the boat, the less likely I will have any interaction with the owner.
Oh, absolutely.
And
at your level, yeah, absolutely.
At my level, at any boat that's over about 120 feet, for the most part, we will rarely have any most of the time, let's say up to about 150, it's the captain. The captain's still very much in charge of managing their refit. There may be a management company, but they can be the interface, and I'm good with that. Where we struggle too. I have no idea how somebody's presenting my electrical survey or my report, for example, all the way up to an owner. In fact, I firmly don't believe the owner ever sees it because I'm not sure that they, and again, I don't write something, but electric, in my opinion, is obviously the most important system on the boat.
Sure.
And for safety, it is. But I have no idea why an owner wouldn't make that decision to purchase that equipment when it's so clearly that it's not safe. But I have no idea if that ever made it past the yacht management company or if it even made the budget. And that's hard because those are the people that are protecting the owner, but they're also preventing kind of some of that customer service that.
I agree.
Yeah, it is a hard balance.
It is super hard. And you know, and when you're talking the larger levels, it may not even be an individual. It could be something called a family office, right?
Absolutely. And they have fleets of vessels.
Right. So this is where the rubber is meeting the road in terms of how we better the industry, because there is what I'll call, and I don't mean in a negative connotation, but for visualization, right? The dragon at the gate. If the dragon at the gate has no idea what they're doing, it's a huge problem.
Agree.
And I don't know, like, owners are too busy to have educational seminars, especially after a certain size, as you pointed out. Family offices are too busy to,
They're managing a million other things. And then here's this boat. And they're like, really? That's on my plate? Put it on your plate. You know, like we're not interested. I've often wondered why, and I have heard about this, not in the U.S., but in panels in other countries about the insurance companies, for example, getting involved with yacht management, which I understand. Nobody wants that either at all. Right. But I understand. Lloyd's will sit there and say, here's two Benettis.
Yeah.
One's got a full-time crew that's managing it. Maybe it's even a part-time, but full-time. They're on the boat. They're managing it. They're taking care of it. And this one's mothballed. and put away for 4 or 5 months. And yeah, the bilge pumps are working good. But beyond that, nobody's really checking on it. Which boat's more valuable? They were both built at the same time, but that this boat that's hardly being maintained is absolutely losing its value more than this one. So I'm surprised the insurance industry hasn't. But they too don't want to upset the owners. They too don't want to upset that apple cart or that balance. But at some point, how do we get around that?
Well, so what I've been seeing insurance involved with a little bit is not that scenario.
Okay.
So let's say a vessel has to go in for some work.
Mm-hmm.
They will insist on certain, I've even had it where they want a local yard, well-known yard here, like an LMC or Bradford or something like that. They'll have them say, look, we need to know you have X, Y, and Z in place. Because a lot of these yards, what they do is they put the onus on the owner, right? The owner has to add them as an additional insured because they don't want to be on the hook if something should go wrong on the vessel, right? So that gets into a whole other avenue of liabilities, risks. But just sticking to the scenario that you mentioned, the reason why insurers don't do more is because right now the law in the U.S. is a really funky term called uberami fide. And what that means
Did you get that, Jordan? Uberami fide.
Uberami fide. So it's utmost good faith. So it puts the onus on the owner to tell the insurance company every little thing that's wrong with the boat, whether they know it or not.
That's probably a quiet conversation.
Yeah. So the problem there is owners may not know what's actually wrong with their vessel. And that gets into a whole other can of worms. It's probably good for another podcast.
All right.
Anyway.
We'll save that one. And I've also seen these ETOs. Have you seen this? They go on board the boat and Jordan, can you look up the producer Jordan? I'm using you a lot today. For ETO, what it stands for. I want to say it's like engineering technical officer.
Oh, okay.
But it's also there's another word in there for that. But that essentially they either represent the builder.
Electrotechnical officer.
Electrotechnical, but not what did I say? Engineer. So it's electrotechnical, but they represent either the builder, the management company, but they are technically qualified to go on board. They're not a surveyor, so they're not doing the survey, but they're helping the crew manage the repair.
Okay.
Because the crew essentially, so this person is kind of like middle management hired by the owner.
Okay, so they are hired by the owner.
They're hired by the owner.
Okay.
And they're either to either work with the management or micromanage the management.
Right.
Or the builder and help the crew make sure they know. But then I'm kind of like, well, where'd they find this person? So they're not a live-aboard member of the crew, but they're technically the crew. They're kind of like an owner's agent with skills.
Right. Well, I mean,
and that's great to have. While it's the family, like you're saying, it's the family. What were you calling
whether
it?
it's called whether it's a family office,
the family
or
office,
a one-off owner,
but maybe there is this electrotechnical.
Sorry, correction. Electrotechnical officer is on a Navy ship.
Okay.
Electrical technical officer is on a yacht.
Is on a yacht. But we recently at Repovich in Safe Harbor, we have dealt with a couple of ETOs.
Okay.
That are on boats, but they don't stay with the boat all the time. But they are there either as the owner's rep, or they're there on behalf of the builder if it's somewhat warranty. It's interesting.
Yes.
As an ETO,
Yeah.
I actually like it.
Yes.
Because they are there, they are qualified. They know what they're looking at.
Bingo.
Professionalism, just what you're talking about.
I think this is a good thing.
Yeah, I think it's a great thing.
I think it's really good. So, I I go back to my life on working, cargo ships and
Okay.
those kinds of vessels.
And they had that? They had that
you
type
have a series, well, they're called
something else.
insurance lingo. They're supernumeraries. So they're people.
Well, these are two big terms we're learning today.
They're supernumeraries, or supercargo, even though they're humans.
Okay.
What they are people that go on board to perform technical services. They're technically not crew. They're not the crew complement, right? Under SOLAS, but what they're there to do. So can you imagine? You have a working vessel that's got a bunch of refrigerated cargoes,
Okay.
right? Refrigerated containers to make sure it can make it from, say, China to the US or China to wherever. You'd have technicians on board to make sure that they keep functioning throughout the voyage, because you lose one container full of shrimp, that's a lot of money.
Probably going to cost you your whole trip.
Well, bingo. So they have these people on board, and I've always said this needs to be translated to the yacht industry.
It's happening.
And it's happening. I'm so happy to hear that. I've made that recommendation on a few one-off cases where the vessel is having a problem. People cannot figure out what's happening, and they have to make a transit. They have to go foreign because of the cruising permit, and
Whatever.
the local yard doesn't want to issue the affidavit saying we're actually doing work here. Because unless you've paid them the money, they don't want to give you the affidavit.
Sure.
So there's a little bit going on there, right? So in those instances, I've had, made that recommendation, and whoever the owner is, whether it's the actual owner or an office or a manager, it's sometimes a fight, but eventually it gets passed on, and they're like, yes, let's do that.
Well, these seem to be occurring on newer Netherlander boats
Okay.
that they have these ETOs. And it's very helpful, because this person is
Absolutely.
coming in not as a crew person. From my perspective, from
Right.
Awards Electrical, is not a crew person saying, when we're underway, I'm noticing this and that, but I have to do this. This is a person that's come in, either understood the build, understood from the very beginning everything, and can say, and will know right off if I'm on my game or not.
Right.
And I love that. Good. Call me out, because you know what? My competition isn't going to necessarily be on their game like me. No problem.
Right.
It is starting to happen only on the super big boats. And recently, for
Yes.
me, we're interacting. I love it. So I hope that it continues.
Yeah. No, that's great.
Yeah. So I
That's
do
great.
think that they're listening to you. Maybe they're taking a while. We'll give Michelle
I know
credit.
It was me personally.
It was Michelle. It was her. She did it. Yep.
I listen, anything that gives the owner their time aboard 100% without a snag
Correct.
is a win.
Agree.
And that is the job of the industry, because if they're an unhappy owner, they may not buy the next size up.
And we need them
And we
to
need
buy
them.
that.
Absolutely. We absolutely.
We do.
And to support each other to continually raise what you call that A game, right? And I think we only do that if we're thinking of each other, right? You have an electrical issue, you need to go talk to Christy. You've got a legal issue, you need to talk to Michelle. I don't know the answer to this. Let me make a few calls and come back to you.
Right.
Like, I'll do that.
I do that too all the
You
time.
know, I don't charge them for it. It's just, I think if we don't do that, we're not, that is the goal of this industry, right? I think what I'll call the smaller boat space, the NMMA type boats of the world, they've done an amazing job of always thinking, how can we make it easier for the wreck boater to go out there
A
and
wonderful
enjoy-
experience. Yeah.
Exactly.
Get on the water.
And look at some of the CEOs that they've hired, right?
Mm-hmm.
The gal from Winnebago, for example. I mean, when you start looking at some of these people, you're like, they've done an amazing job in that space, the 45 and under space,
Yeah.
right?
No, it's true.
Now we need to do the same for the 45 and over. And I think we're very fragmented in that regard. I think that we need to get beyond. I don't view any other maritime lawyer as my competition. I, in fact, look at them as like a resource because I may not have the answer, but you may have experienced this. And I think we need to be more open about
Agree.
that, and I don't know what the reason is for that other than maybe just plain old fear that I don't know, like fear of like, I'm going to miss out on this opportunity. But no, I'm the first that's ready to be like, you know what? So-and-so may be
I
better
agree.
suited for your needs at this point.
Well, that's because you're qualified, you're professional, and you're confident in who you are and what you are. So you're not intimidated by somebody who's just asking a question. We all
Right.
have an issue. What I always say is, I couldn't service every boat even if I wanted to. If all of them came here and they
Right.
all only had my phone number in their phones under electric, all it said was Wards, I would fail
Right.
because I couldn't service every single boat here. So
Right.
I need people that are in the like business to be as professional to take care of the boats because we need them as a community. I always remind people, South Florida is not a destination for yachting. People come here because the concentration of services,
Correct.
goods, and our geographical location to the Caribbean. But they're
Correct.
coming here for those purposes. And if we don't make this a place for them,
Right.
then we're going to all lose, like you're saying. So
Correct.
it's on all of us to help have that experience.
That's the one thing we don't want to do is lose out to, you don't know how many times I'll hear something along the lines of, because remember, I'm physically based in Miami. Oh, Miami, such a crummy place to get my boat worked on. And then my response is, Fort Lauderdale is right there. It's literally right there. Do you need me to make some calls for you?
And by the way, it's only like 18 miles away. It's not like it's, but I hear the opposite that, well, I'm going to be down in Miami. Do you guys go there? And it's like, it's not a foreign land. It's 18 miles away. I mean, I'm going to go to Costa Rica if you need me to, wherever,
Right.
let's go,
Right.
wherever we need
Right.
to be.
Or they'll be, well, I tend to take my vessel to, say, Newport. I go to Newport, there's no tax there. It's a great place. Really, how is the repair situation there? And they kind of like get real quiet.
Because everybody comes from Fort Lauderdale.
Exactly. So look, I mean, at the end of the day, if we keep doing, we keep our eye on the prize, which is to make the owner love every experience that he, she, they, whoever it may be, family, office, they have an amazing time on that boat. You've got them hooked. I mean,
Absolutely.
this is an amazing thing to do.
We really are part of an amazing industry.
Exactly.
Not to say that word too many times. But on tariffs, let's go back to our,
Okay.
let's conclude.
Okay.
Tariffs.
All right.
Don't be afraid to buy a boat in the U.S. Don't shy away from boating because of tariffs. Don't
No.
shy away from any
No.
of it. Buy American.
Yep.
Buy the boat. What if I have a boat and I'm trying to sell it right now? As long as it's U.S. flag, my boat's worth more money.
Correct.
So I'm sitting on something that's worth a lot more now.
Correct.
That's awesome. That's
Yeah.
a great thing.
That is a great thing.
So buy a boat, get a new boat, use it, break it, and call Wards.
There you go.
Okay.
Sounds like a
And
plan.
Michelle, when you're ready to buy it and sell it, thank you for being here today.
Of course.
It was such a pleasure, and I really love your perspective on everything and being
Thank
positive.
you.
And it's also realistic. I know that as women, we spoke, and we both have children and all the things in front, but I do appreciate you giving up your time and volunteering and doing all that you do to help our industry. So
Oh,
thank you.
And thank you. This was
This was
very
fun, and I'm
nice
going to invite you
opportunity.
again. So we're going to have plenty of new topics. You tell me the next time you want to talk about it.
Wow. Okay. All
Okay?
right.
All right.
Sounds like a plan.
That's it. Thank you. Thank you for being here.
Thank you.
Good?
Was that good?
Excellent.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
good.
Producer Jordan, what
So good.
you got all those notes?
So how long have you been doing this?
Do we look really professional?
Jesus.
This is our third season. So we did the first season. My dad was my first guest, and I
That
did
would
it.
make sense.
Yes, and I did it
That's
because
wonderful, though. That's really
it's our
wonderful.
75th,
Yeah.
and my whole saying that first season was that we made it to our 75th anniversary, but I don't want to be those people that have you ever walked into those stores and you see all the plaques that like you can tell they peaked at like 92, but after that
Yes.
it's like it's 2025. You got any new awards up there or anything?
know,
And
right.
I wanted it to be that we're just getting started. So we're 75. So that's a book. We're not on this anymore. So that's a book that's for me to sign that you were here for season 3.
Oh, okay.
It's just, there's nothing that you have to do.
Okay.
So I wanted it. The other thing is I have a ton of new, young, engineers, and they're great. But they have no idea that there was a Bob Rossioli.
Oh.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so they think Rossioli Yachting was sold to One Water Yacht, but they never met a Bob Rossioli.
Right.
And
That there was a real human
or George
with the last
Cable.
name Rossioli.
Right.
Right.
Or Ward.
Right.
Or, and so
Right.
I was like, wow. So I just invited all the CEOs that I knew of family businesses.
Sure.
And that was season 1.
Okay.
Season 2 was just at the
Super
boat
nice.
show.
Yeah.
And it was all different things, just people that came by, and it was at Flibs. And then
Right.
I just thought this would be good to do with all the stuff that was CBP and tariffs. We're talking about foreign trade zones. My one this morning was on USLNH, Longshore.
How funny.
So I just figured I would cover. The associations don't necessarily have money
They don't.
to do those things. So I had Phil Purcell talking about the train bridge or the
Yes.
tunnel.
Right.
But these are all issues. And so I'm like, you know what? I don't mind. Put it up. I'm a founding member of MISF, but at least maybe we can send captains this talking about tariffs, talking about USLNH, talking about CBP or any of it. So,
Right.
and I just think it's fun to do. So, and this was our old building, as you know.
Yeah,
So we turned it into
I
a
remember
podcast.
this was the building I used to come to way back in the day, right?
Yeah. We moved in 03. So
Okay.
we left it sitting here, and then I just said, I wanted to do it. I have a building. We'll turn it into a studio.
Yeah.
And then Lee's made it happen.
There you go.
So I'll send it out when it comes out and everything. It'll be on YouTube,
Cool.
and
Oh,
it'll be on
okay.
Spotify and out.
Oh dear.
Any place you get your podcasts.
All of the iRadio,
iHeartRadio, all of
Okay.
that. I know.
It's on all of the platforms.
Jeez, we're just like
If you're gonna do it, you gotta do it right.
apparently.
Well, and people don't think that of old Ward's Marine, and again, we've been around a long time, but we still have to earn business, and we still need to be out there. And
Right.
Yeah.
No, I totally understand that, and it's funny because you would think that over the years, the word of mouth and the word of mouth and the word of mouth. You didn't know me until
until like 2 weeks ago, and I'm like, oh my God, this woman is so we're sisters from another mother. I didn't. How is it that we have run in the same
right
for decades? Our kids are even very similar in age. I
Correct.
think
Yes.
How many do you have?
I've got 2 daughters, 26 and 20, and the other one just turned 22.
Right, and I'm 2 boys, 22 and 27. So it's like
Right, they're like right there, right? So it was like,
yeah. Thank you for joining us this season on season 3 of the Ward's Way podcast. Be sure you subscribe because there's much more to come.